Hi, welcome back to the Fantasy Football Props. Thanks for joining me tonight. This is our Week 4 waiver wire video. I want to thank you guys for watching, subscribe, and helping grow the channel, giving us feedback. We're looking to improve our product all the time, whether it's audio, visual, information like that. We want to continue to do that. We thank those that partnership with us on Patreon. Now, before we get into our Week 4 waiver wire video, I have to my head spin a little bit tonight, and it's not because of fantasy football per se. When I look back at this year, I think that we did pretty good in preseason. I think we've nailed some trends. We talked about some players. I think we've been pretty accurate in some of our advice that we've given you. You'll never be perfect out there, but I think we've done a good job. If you stick to the numbers and you play the averages, in the end, you're going to win. There'll always be anomalies. Stick to the numbers. My head is spinning because my Minnesota Vikings today, I'm not going to lie, I know it's the NFL. There's no such thing as a give-me game, but if there was ever a game that I thought this was a guaranteed win, I thought this was it. Of course, they got crushed by the Bills today. I wonder how many survivor pools got destroyed. In fact, I heard tons of them are done because of it. Vegas calculated this was the worst upset going all the way back to 1992. And I think it's one of those classic games where last week we played the Packers, next week they're looking ahead to the Rams on a Thursday game in a short week, and we just overlooked the Bills and they caught us in those. So that was kind of a brutal loss for us right there. But here we are. It's Sunday night. Week 3 is basically finished. One more game tomorrow night. We just saw that the Lions upset the Patriots. Got some things they got to work out on offense there. Now, Week 3 is basically done, and we're at the point now where we can really begin to lock down patterns, trends, offensive, defensive rankings, and it's going to make it a lot easier for next week's start sit video, even for some of our waiver wire decisions right now. This is going to help. Now, maybe you're looking at a waiver wire video because you've had injuries, ineffective play, simply looking to improve your bench or keep players off your opponent's bench, or dealing with bye weeks. And this week is the first week we have bye weeks. This week is Carolina and Washington are on a bye, so if you have players there, Cam Newton, somebody like that, they're not going to play. Now, we always mention this because people always ask us why we take this approach to our waiver wire video. Now, what we do is we don't typically give you a guy that's 95% available, although every once in a while we'll do that. The reason why we don't do that is guys that are 95% available often are because there's a reason why they're widely available. They're not very good. They're not very reliable. And so what we would rather do is go in each position, give you 5 or 6 players that are maybe 20 or 30% available, but we feel like you can trust if they're out there. So if one guy's not in the waiver wire availability, definitely one of those guys will be, and you can trust them. And we say this in all of our videos, and this is so important. You got to contextualize this information. There's just so many different league settings out there. Sizes are different. League scoring is different. Bench sizes are different. The size of your league is different. All these things affect these decisions, so you have to contextualize this. Now, some early concerns before we get into the waiver wire video. Evan Ingram today went down with a knee injury. He's going to have an MRI on Monday. Now, he was seen walking around with a brace on his knee after the game. He told reporters he's going to be fine. There might be some MCL damage there, but it appears he avoided any serious injury. I would imagine he's going to probably miss a game or two, but we'll find out on Monday. AJ Green left the game today with a groin injury. He said he expects to play Week 4. We'll have to monitor his practice reps this week and see how he does. And then Jimmy Garoppolo left the game with what appears to be everything we're getting from San Francisco. Sounds like that's a serious knee injury. Sounds like an ACL tear, something along those lines. Now, I wasn't a huge fan of Jimmy Garoppolo in terms of fantasy going into this year, so that doesn't break my heart necessarily. But I think it's going to hurt a lot of peripheral players like Matt Breida or George Kittle. I think George Kittle was in for a top 10 finish in tight end scoring. Obviously, that's going to take a major hit. Now, this week, we're going to try it different. Sometimes I'll start with the running backs, quarterbacks, but this week I want to start with our wide receivers. And there's a lot of really good wideouts out there still. And this is one of the reasons why we say you got to get running backs early. One, there's value in that. I think running backs win your league, but also year in and year out, I think there's always good wide receivers out there that you can pick up after the draft or if you have struggles. And we have some great examples of it this week. So let's get to that. So the first one I get to is Calvin Ridley, Atlanta's first-round rookie wide receiver, who is 55% available out there in leagues. He should be the hottest pickup this week, I think, of all the pickups out there. Last week, he had 4 catches, 64 yards, and a TD. Today, he goes off 7 catches, 146 yards, and 3 touchdowns. This guy was huge. Now, I think it's not just they hit a good game. It's not just he's a rookie wide receiver. I think there's a lot of things that bodes well, and we can expect. Obviously, he's not going to have a lot of weeks like he had this week, but I think he can continue to be productive. One, that Atlanta's defense is struggling. The last 2 key defenders on defense. They get up a lot of points. That means they're going to be high-scoring games. The over-under is going to be higher, and so there's just more volume out there. I think another thing that bodes really well for him, and why I think Calvin can be competitive and be a nice play for you down the stretch, is Julio Jones is going to get double teams. He's still going to get the attention. It's going to leave him in single coverage a lot. So I think Calvin's in a great situation to thrive. You got to pick this guy up, especially if you're in a dynasty league. Another guy out there that you got to take a serious look at is Mike Williams, San Diego wide receiver. He's 45% available in leagues. Now, we've talked about him. Time is running out to grab this guy. You need to do it. Last year, he was a first-round pick, 7th overall. He's a big physical receiver. He's got all the skills. Now, what hurt him last year is he missed time because of a back injury. Now, in week 1, he had 5 catches, 81 yards. And then in week 2, he goes out, he only has 2 catches, 27 yards, and a TD. That was only on 2 targets, but if you go back to that game, too, what happened was game flow. They jumped out quickly on the Bills, 28-3. They didn't need to throw the ball a lot. Well, today he goes out, he has 4 catches, 81 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's firmly entrenched opposite of Keenan Allen as the number 2 wide receiver there with a veteran quarterback and an offense that moves the ball quite a bit through the air. So you got to take a look at Mike Williams. He's a huge pickup out there. I think another thing that's changing things a little bit is Chargers had a good defense last year. Coming into this year, they were ranked by a lot of people in the top 5, definitely top 10. But without Joey Bosa there, that defense is just not the same defense. They've taken a step backwards. That's another defense that's been allowing a lot of points, which of course requires the offense to score a lot of points and keep that ball going, which bodes well for Mike Williams. Another guy out there you got to take a look at wide receiver. There's just so many guys out there. Tyler Boyd, we talked about him last week. I want to talk about him again. He is 86% available in leagues out there, Tyler Boyd. Now, we previewed him last week. Now, he had a quiet first half today. He wasn't huge per se. We got a huge boost when Green went down with a groin injury. Last week, he had 6 catches, 91 yards, and a TD. He follows it up today by going 6 catches, 132 yards, and a TD. He had a nice rookie season, actually. He had 51 catches and 603 yards. For a rookie, that's pretty good. But then year 2, he had some injuries, and that offense as a whole struggled. The offensive line was bad. Andy Dalton struggled. They got a new offensive coordinator. There's a lot of things going on. That led to a disappointing year. But he's back. He's healthy. He looks good. He's been a huge part of that thing. And the Bengals defense is below average. I think a new offensive coordinator, a new offensive line, some of the changes they've made there has improved that team quite a bit. So I think that Tyler Boyd is a guy that's going to, in the right matchup, be a nice wide receiver 3 play for some of you guys that are in 10 to 12 team leagues or bigger. Another one out there is Will Fuller. Now, this guy's only 11% available, but I wanted to mention him because that means for 10% of you, this guy's available, and if he is, you've got to grab Will Fuller. He had another big day today. He's had back-to-back weeks with over 100 yards, a touchdown in each game. That gives him 8 touchdowns in the last 6 games where him and Deshaun Watson have been on the field together. And you look back, this is a former first-round pick. As a rookie year, he did really well, had a great preseason as a rookie. First 4 games, he looked good. Then he had some injuries, ineffective play by the quarterback. Got injured last year. Once again, he started off injured, but then when him and Watson were on the field together, they shined. Watson got hurt. So this is a guy, when he's on the field and when he's healthy, especially with Watson, he's very, very productive. You got to pick up Will Fuller there. Now, Jordy Nelson, I think, surprised a lot of people today. Jordy Nelson is 48% available. He exploded today. He goes off for 6 catches, 173 yards, and a TD. Now, during the preseason, the Raiders coaches and teammates really talked about how fast, quick he was. He was getting separation. He looked good. He looked like the old Jordy Nelson. Now, he was quiet the first 2 weeks, but they had some tough defensive matchups. Carr was struggling a little bit. Now, this week they play the Browns. So is he a guy that you could pick up, you could play? I think he's a guy that's going to be a matchup play from week to week, depending upon the depth of your league, who they're playing. I think that this week he'd be maybe a decent play, but he's not a great play. I know you hear the names Cleveland Browns, you think, okay, I've got to start a guy against him. But the one thing about the Cleveland Browns, they have their struggles, but they actually have a lot of young, talented defensive players. That defense is underrated. So Jordy Nelson's a guy that maybe you need to pick up. He's a guy that you certainly can use at times, but don't get too excited about this. Another one out there that I really like is Christian Kirk, wide receiver at the Cardinals. He's 97% available. Today goes out, he had 7 catches, 90 yards. He's seen an increase in targets, yards, and catches all 3 weeks, starting from the beginning of the season. Now, I expect that Josh Rosen is going to be at the helm next week. I think he's going to be a slight upgrade over Sam Bradford, who struggled. What's funny about that is they were right there in the game today. In the last 2 drives, they pulled Bradford out and let Josh Rosen start. Now, if you look at Kirk, he was a standout all the way through camp. He was doing great in camp. In fact, offensive lineman Pugh, who played with Beckham in New York, said of Kirk, the Cardinals' second-round draft pick, I know he's making plays. He's very impressive how he gets open, makes plays. He's making an impact in multiple areas of the game. He's a great player to have on your team. And then he went on to say this. He's one of the most electrifying stars in the NFL. He has a bright future. He reminds me a little bit of another number 13 I used to play with in New York, referring to, of course, Odell Beckham. So Pugh is saying, this guy reminds me of Odell Beckham. He's got big hands. He did well at the Combine. He had a really good college career there. I like this. I think the one that's held him back the first couple of weeks, where I haven't heard a whole lot from him, is just the overall play of that offensive line and the quarterback. This is a guy that's going to be huge. In fact, Sam Bradford said that this guy has an extra gear on game days. He's got some burst, he's got some speed. It's really nice to see that. And so everything coming out of camp leading up to this year was that Christian Kirk was very underrated. He's got a lot of gifts, he's got a lot of talent, a lot of comparisons to Odell Beckham. Had a good game today. That offense might struggle this year, but it's going to get better. It's not going to be as bad as it was. And I think he's going to be one of the wide receivers or players that's going to benefit from some of those changes there. So Christian Kirk, especially in Dynasty Leagues, you need to keep an eye on him. Another guy to talk about is Geronimo Ellison out there. 66% available wide receiver for the Packers. He's been staying somewhat productive. I think actually he's staying fairly productive as a wide receiver 3 because he has Cobb and Adams ahead of him. Now, the concern I have is his targets have dropped from week 1. He had 8, then he went down to 6, and this week he only had 4 targets. Potentially he could leapfrog Randall Cobb as a pecking order there, but I don't see that happen barring an injury. And so right now, he's a guy that would be, for me, a bench stash. But not a viable starter. But he does have talent. He does play with Aaron Rodgers, so he's a guy that definitely could be on deeper leagues on your bench. And who knows, maybe an injury or maybe a continued ineffective play by other players. Maybe Cobb struggles, things like that. He could suddenly become the number 2 guy there and have a great play. So keep an eye on him. This week, I'm not a huge John Brown fan in terms of long term, but if you're looking for a guy that you need to pick up and play for this week, here's one of them, John Brown. 37% available. He plays Pittsburgh in week 4. That defense has been brutal. The Pittsburgh defense going into week 9, we'll see what they do tomorrow night, has been allowing 27.3 points per game. Now, John Brown, the last 2 games, has averaged 9.5 targets per game and averaging 89 receiving yards per game. He's got 2 touchdowns on the year, and so John Brown is a great play for week 4. If you need a plug and play this week, he's a guy you should look at. Another wide receiver out there, Sammy Watkins, 16% available. Usually I'd stay away from this guy because the volume's simply not there. There's so many guys ahead. We see the goal line carriers are going to Hunt. Of course, we see Kelsey's doing well and Hill. And so he's really like the 4th guy in that order. But yet this offense is so prolific right now and they're scoring so many points that this guy's keeping up good numbers. In fact, the last 2 weeks, he's averaged over 20 fantasy points last 2 weeks. So this guy's been very productive out there. I think a fun game for me to watch. I'd love to see the Chiefs play the Rams. Those 2 offenses at this point look unstoppable. I'd love to see those 2 line up. So Sammy Watkins is another guy that's value. Another guy out there is Michael Crabtree, 15% available in leagues. I'm not a big fan of Michael Crabtree, but he benefits once again playing a brutal Pittsburgh defense. Now on the Ravens team there, if you look at Michael Crabtree, he's the number 1 wide receiver. He lands for me as a wide receiver 4, I think, in most fantasy teams or lineups. But with his sweet matchup against Pittsburgh this week, I would say that he's a wide receiver 2 in that matchup. Kenny Golladay, 21% available. 3 weeks in a row now, he's had good games. Clearly, he's the most talented wide receiver on that team. Stafford loves to look his way. This guy's got a bright future in there, so Kenny Galladay's got to be picked up. He's got to be played. Going forward, he'll be a wide receiver 3. He might even creep into wide receiver 2 conversations as he continues to improve. Then there's Keelan Cole, 25% available out there. Now, if you follow us, if you've been watching our channel, you know, and we've given a lot of statistical breakdowns, and I'm not going to get real deep in this video, and the reason why is I don't want it to be an hour and a half, 2 hours long. I want to give you some quick names to consider, but we've given some statistics why I'm not a huge Blake Bortles fan. I think he's a game manager. I think he could have some good games, but I'm not impressed by him. I think Keelan Cole is a great wide receiver whose numbers will be hurt a little bit by that scheme. They like to play defense. They're going to want to run the ball, control the clock, kind of an old school thing. I think he's also hurt by Blake Bortles' play. Today he had a quiet day. It's funny, going into the video, if you watch our start sit video, we said this is going to be a defensive battle, and we didn't advise starting a lot of players per se in this one. Sure enough, final score is 9-6, very much a defensive battle there. What's really funny about this matchup, we look at the Jaguars last year. They were a very good team, ended up 10-6. They made it to the conference finals, but twice last year when they played the Titans, they lost both games. Sure enough, the Titans had their number again today and beat them one more time. So I look at Cole's ceiling. I think his ceiling's a little limited by the defense. In fact, they like to win games playing defense and by Bortles' play, but he's still a very good wide receiver. You got to pick up Keelan Cole. Another guy out there may not be really fun and sexy, but you need to consider Kenny Stills. 27% available out there. He's not a great wide receiver, but he is a wide receiver 1 on the Dolphins. At the end of the year, barring an injury, I guarantee that he'll lead Miami in receiving touchdowns and receiving yards. And now this week, he plays New England's got a great matchup. And so I like Kenny Stills as a wide receiver 3-4, depending upon the matchup. But this week, he's definitely going to be a wide receiver 3 against the Patriots. Start him and pick him up. Sterling Shepard, another guy there. 34% available. He's a very good, underrated wide receiver 2 who sometimes gets lost in the fact there's so much talent on that team you forget about him. Had a TD today. The offense is beginning to look better and better in New York there. They're playing better and better each week. And I think Coach Sherman is starting to work some of the magic that he did like with Case Keenum last year in Minnesota, where really he made Case Keenum there. And like he did with Nick Foles back in 2013 when he was the offensive coordinator. Nick Foles had 27 touchdown passes to only 2 interceptions. Now this week they play New Orleans, and that defense for New Orleans has been struggling, and Drew Brees is playing great ball right now. And so that's going to be a high-scoring game. I think New York's going to have to throw the ball a lot to stay in that one, and I think that one of the benefactors of that's going to be Sterling Shepard. He's going to have a decent day there. There's Chris Godwin out there at 59% available in most leagues. We'll see what he does tomorrow night, but he's been impressive in preseason. The coaches loved him. There's a lot of talk that eventually he's going to overtake Jackson for the number 2 guy there, and he's looked very good. He hasn't done anything to hurt that talk. He's only secured that. He's one of the first 2 weeks and hit 2 touchdowns. If anything's hurt his value in fantasy, it's been Jackson's resurgence. But Godwin's a nice stash that you should have on your bench. And there's Antonio Callaway, wide receiver of the Browns. Of course, Josh Gordon gets traded away, so he becomes the number 2 guy there. I think this guy's got a nice future, especially in dynasty leagues. The one concern I have, he's still a rookie. There's going to be rookie mistakes. There's that learning curve. Now you take the fact that he's a rookie with a rookie quarterback. Baker's going to be starter. They made the announcements, or at least it leaked out today, that come tomorrow, the Browns are going to announce that Baker Mayfield's going to be the starting quarterback. But come on, we all knew that was coming anyways, right? And so he's a guy that I wouldn't start at this point, but I definitely, if you're in a dynasty league, I would sit and watch his development. Last week he did have 10 targets. You got Devin Funchess out there, 15% available. He's not a great wide receiver, but he is very productive. You got Alshon Jeffrey, 16% available, who's due to come back any day now. It sounds like next week he'll probably be back, if not for sure the week after. Then you got Marquise Goodwin, who's 20% available. He had a touchdown today. Now I have concerns about Marquise Goodwin. I think he had huge value with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. They had great chemistry. Sounds like Jimmy's going to be out for the year, and if he does, that's a huge hit on Goodwin there. And so he is available, but he's a guy that I would probably shy away from, especially when we're looking at a season-ending injury there. So those are a number of wide receivers. There is so much talent out there at wide receivers, and I tell you what, one of the things you could do if you're struggling, you haven't started off well, what you could do, you could trade away a big name wide receiver that you have to get another running back or to shore up another position and pick one of these guys up or package something together. These are guys, a few of them we mentioned, they're not just 1 week wonders. These are guys that are going to be productive for the rest of the year. Let's get to our next position. So the running backs. So where do we begin at running backs? Well, I want to talk about Aaron Jones, running back for the Packers, who's 34% available. He served his 2-game suspension. He returned today. Now, we have said it all preseason. We said it last year. I know some people hate on us for this. When it's all said and done, this guy's going to win the running back job there. Now, what we did say last week, and even starts the video, is we really like Aaron Jones. We got to give him a week to come back, get his feet wet, work into that offense. We didn't advise start him this week. We said we really love him in week 4. So today, he was the best running back on the field for the Packers, hands down. Now, if you look at Williams, the first 2 weeks this year, he had 31 carries, 106 yards. That's 3.42 yards per carry. That is not impressive. And some said, well, he had really good defense that he played against, so that's true. But that yards per carry that he struggled with goes all the way back to last year. This is a guy that's only had 1 game where his yards per carry have been over 4 when he's had a significant amount of carries. Williams had 15 carries and 16 carries the first 2 weeks. Now today dropped down to 5. You look at Jones, he had 6 carries. He looked like the much better running back there. Now I know Williams does have some value in the passing games. He's got good hands, but just as far as being a pure running back, it's Aaron Jones. Say he goes out 6 carries, 42 yards, 7.0 yards per carry. Next week that role is going to increase. I guarantee it. And he's going to work into a really nice running back 2 to 3 role there. So consider him. Another one is Kerryon Johnson, 26% available. Tonight against the Patriots, he goes out, he has over 100 yards rushing. He looked good. Nice thing about him, he's very versatile. He is a 3-down back. He's got great hands. He's very fast, quick. We've been seeing each week he's been increasing his role. Detroit has, and so he's a really good pickup. He's a great pickup in dynasty leagues. Now, we talked about how LeGarrette Blount will steal some carries from him, and that's going to limit his ceiling a little bit, and that's probably going to happen still from this point forward. Tonight, I think they split carries right down the middle, but it's very clear that Kerryon Johnson is the better running back. Then you have Matt Breida out there. Matt Breida is still 14% available in leagues. After going last week, 11 carries, 138 yards, and a TD. Today he goes off for 10 carries for 90 yards. That yards per carry has been insane. The one thing that we have said about him, and I think the numbers are beginning to show that we were right in our assessment, is that his size will restrict his volume. His carries have been consistent. I think he had 11, 11, and 10 carries, averaging to 10.6 carries per game in 3 games. Now, he's a running back 2 in PPRs because he's got very good hands. He's very active in the passing game, but in standard leagues, he needs to drop down. Another thing that's going to hurt his value, as we talked about, is Jimmy Garoppolo if he's out for the year. But he's a guy that is 14 to 15% available that you should pick up. You have Giovanni Bernard, 18% available. There are reports that Mixon could be back next week. That seems like a pretty quick recovery from that knee scope that he had. I think it's unlikely that he returns. I think that Giovanni Bernard will be the starting running back for at least one more game. He had a nice game today, 12 carries, 61 yards, 5.1 yards per carry, and he had 5 catches for 25 yards. He's a guy that's going to be a handcuff for Mixon owners or a one-game fill-in for you. He's not a guy that if you don't have Mixon doesn't have value, but for one game he could be huge, or I would definitely urge you to handcuff him. You have Isaiah Crowell, 19% available out there. We talked about Crowell a lot. I think this is the year he breaks 1,000 rushing yards. We'll see how that plays out, but I feel like he's going to do that. But he's got 4 touchdowns in the first 3 games and a 4.5 yards per carry, and he's seen some targets in the passing game. The one thing that hurts him is Powell does lower his value. When I look at Powell is more of a running back 3. I'm sorry, Paul would lower his value, Crowell's value, to kind of a running back 3. He'll have some nice games, but of course there'll be some games where he disappears there. But he's another guy that if you're desperate for running back, he's not a bad play at all. Philip Lindsay, 20% available out there. Got ejected throwing punches in the game, but the game started off good. He had 4 carries for 20 yards, looked great again, and then gets kicked out. Now, you look at Freeman went out, and Freeman actually had a solid day today, and that's going to lower Philip Lindsay's value a little bit. Lindsay is very much like a Matt Breida in terms of his size. I think he's a guy that's going to be very electric. I think he's got a great role and huge value in PPR leagues, a little bit lower in standards. Reminds me, once again, a lot of Matt Breida. Chris Carson. So Chris Carson got dropped by a lot of you out there because you panicked after 2 weeks. I thought about it, but you got to be patient in fantasy football. There are always going to be ebbs and flows. There are very few players that week in and week out are going to be productive. So Chris Carson, 30% available out there. And I wondered the first 2 weeks, like, why doesn't Seattle just commit to give him the ball more often? He was way more effective at running back. He had 5.2 yards per carry compared to Penny's 2.2. Sure enough, today Seattle finally stuck with it. They finally gave him a lot of carries, and he responded. 32 carries, 102 rushing yards. He had 2 catches for 22 yards. He looked definitely the better running back there. I think going forward, that's going to be his job. I expect him to see 15 to 20 carries a game unless they fall behind something like that. So Chris Carson, for those that dropped him, sorry, I think you were premature in that. Got Austin Eckler out there, who's 40% available. He has deeper value in PPR leagues as a flex play, or what I call running back 3 playing flex leagues. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that there. He has deeper value in PPR leagues as a flex player or running back 3. He's a guy that's actually getting a lot of touches. He had a decent game today. Team keeps increasing his role, even though Gordon has played very, very well. They use him a lot in the passing game there. The problem with it is because Gordon's there, unless there's an injury, it's hard to trust his volume, so it's hard to trust him week to week, but he's a deeper bench stash. Another guy out there is Alfred Morris, 47% available. The first 3 weeks, here's his carries. He had 12, 14, and 14. They've been very consistent giving the ball, and he's responding. Each week he is increasing his yards. First week he had 38, 48, and this week he had 67 yards rushing for a 4.8 yards per carry, and he added a touchdown to that. He outcarried Breida each week, as we predicted. We said he's a bigger, more physical back. He can handle that punishment. He's going to have more carries than Matt Breida when it's all said and done. He carries very little value in PPR leagues. His value is in standard leagues as a running back 3 or 4, depending upon the matchup or your league size. Then you've got Javarius Allen, running back for the Baltimore Ravens, 74% available out there. This guy's really sucked in the running game. We kind of said that. He's not great in the running game. He's got 16 carries for 32 yards. That's a woeful 2.0 yards per carry. But he's been getting goal line carries. In 3 games, he's got 4 touchdowns. And he's another guy, like many that we previously mentioned, that's maybe not got much value in standards, but he's very active in the passing game. He's got 13 catches through 3 games. So he's a guy that will steal an occasional touchdown on the goal line there. He'll get some catches like that. So if you're desperate, he's another one to consider. And 2 other guys I want to mention out there is Chris Ivory, 94% available. You're only going to pick him up or play him if McCoy misses more time for cracked ribs. He misses today's game because he had those cracked ribs. So if McCoy sits out, you can pick up Chris Ivory. His yards per carry were bad today, but he faced a lot of loaded boxes against the Viking front seven that even though played that whole team played bad today. They're a pretty solid defense. He had 20 carries, 56 yards, but he also had 3 catches for 70 yards. And next week he has a Green Bay defense that should be a little more giving there. And then some of you are going to get excited about Wendell Smallwood. And I would advise you not to get too excited. One, Clement didn't have as good of a game, but he had a good game. And Jay Ajayi will probably be back next week, most likely. And if he is, once again, Wendell Smallwood turns out to be the running back 3 in that order there. So I would stay away from him. Don't get too excited. So there are some running backs that you should consider if you need to pick up. Let's get to our quarterbacks. So quarterbacks out there, let's look at Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco is 86% available. Next week he plays Pittsburgh. We've already mentioned them. That Pittsburgh defense is terrible, allowing 27.3 points per game in the last 9 games. And Flacco's really recovered his career. Going into this year, there's question marks whether Lamar Jackson was going to overtake him. He didn't look good last couple years, but he's playing a lot better. He's averaging 2 touchdown passes per game. Now they've added Brown, Crabtree, and Snead at wide receiver. So I think this week he's a great option to stream as a quarterback out there. If you need somebody for 1 week, I think Joe Flacco is your guy that you should pick up. Another one out there is Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, he's only 18% available, but the reason I want to talk about him, and we'll have to see how he does tomorrow night's game, but the first 2 weeks, he's been the second best quarterback in the NFL behind Pat Mahomes, which, by the way, that says a lot because Pat Mahomes has been phenomenal. He's been the best quarterback to start a season. Through 3 games, he's got 13 touchdown passes to no interceptions. If you have a Pat Mahomes out there, if you got him, if you picked him up, whatever it is, man, you got to be loving this guy. I know he's going to have some bumps in the road. Defenses will make adjustments. He's not going to continue. He's not going to break Peyton Manning's record, but this guy obviously is very talented. Now you look at Ryan Fitzpatrick, he's thrown over 400 yards in the first 2 games and only 4 touchdowns in the first 2 games. Got great weapons, they got a bad defense. That's really a perfect storm to make a great fantasy sleeper there, so Ryan Fitzpatrick. Now, there was a conversation what's going to happen when Winston's back. Winston's going to be back next week. I was a huge advocate to say they're going to give Winston the job, and I think that they would have, but it's undeniable now that until Ryan struggles a little bit, that'll be his team. And so in the near future, okay, in the immediate future that we can see, I think that Ryan Fitzpatrick's going to be a nice play there. Another guy out there that I think has got a decent 1 week play is Andy Dalton. 67% available. Now on this one, I would watch AJ Green, see if he's out or not. His availability will of course affect Dalton's value. He's got that groin injury. So you're playing Atlanta defense that's really taken a step back. Atlanta made some progress on defense last year, but 2 key starters are out for the year on that defense, and that's hurt quite a bit. And we're seeing it. They're struggling quite a bit now. You look at Dalton for the year, he's got 8 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions. Now he had 4 picks last game. They're behind through the ball a lot, but he has played a lot better. They got a better offensive line. The offense as a whole has been better with the new offensive coordinator that they've had. He's not a guy that I would trust week to week, but you look at Andy Dalton, he's great matchup play for injuries, bye weeks, or if you're in a 2-quarterback league. Case Keenum, this one is scary. So Case Keenum is 72% available out there, so most you can pick him up, and he plays Kansas City in a game that would appear to be a shootout. Now the concern that I have is in back-to-back weeks, he's had no touchdown passes and thrown an interception each game. And it's becoming clear to me that Case Keenum's success last year was tied directly to Sherman, who's a great coach and a quarterback guru. And so what can we get with Case Keenum in a game that should be a great matchup for him? It could easily be a game where he throws 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, or he could easily go and have 175 yards and 2 picks. He's very inconsistent, but if you're very desperate, he's a guy that you could go with. One guy that I would suggest that I feel comfortable going with is Eli Manning, who's 78% available out there. Now he plays New Orleans Saints defense that is a mess. That defense had proved quite a bit last year. They are brutal. They are allowing 36 points per game this year. And that's when you consider the fact that one game they only allowed 18 against Tyrod Taylor and the Browns, who at that point the offense was a mess. So 2 other games they've allowed over 40 points. Now, Evan Ingram might miss the game with an injury. It doesn't matter. There's still a lot of weapons. You look at Saquon Barkley there. It's just really sick how good he is in the passing game. He's got great hands. Of course, you got Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard. I love the weapons they have there. This week, Eli goes out. He throws 297 yards, 2 touchdown passes, and 0 picks. Each week, that offense is looking better and better. Coach Sherman's starting to really turn things around there quite a bit. And I think that this week is a great matchup playing Drew Brees. We know Drew Brees is going to put points on the board. This looks like it's going to be a shootout, and New York's going to have to stay pace and throw the ball quite a bit. So I like Eli Manning. Another one out there is Ryan Tannehill, 93% available versus New England. Each week, Ryan Tannehill is looked better. His fantasy points went from 13.6 to 22.12 to 26.16. This week he had 289 yards passing and 3 touchdown passes. That New England's defense has reverted back to the same level as last year. If you look at last year, that New England defense was really the tale of 2 defenses. The first 4 games, they were brutal. They were near the very bottom of the NFL. I think like running a 32nd, 31, 32 in that area there. And then the last 12 games, they played really well. Well, it's like they reverted back to the defense last year. They're having major struggles there. So I think Ryan Tannehill is a great play. Now, some of you, I want to caution against getting too excited. And I was thinking, well, what about Baker Mayfield or Josh Allen? They look really good. I'm excited to see those guys. I think they got a bright future in the NFL, but don't get blinded by the hype. They are not proven. Be wise about how you use these. They're rookie quarterbacks. The learning curve for rookie quarterback is huge. They're going to have some success, but they are not viable fantasy options. Stay away from them until they are more proven. Remember, week 1, Sam Darnold went out, and everybody thought, look at this guy. And of course, Sam Darnold has come back down the earth the last 2 weeks, so be careful. So we'll get some tight end considerations out there. David Njoku, 33% available. We were huge on him. He's very athletic, great hands, looked good in the preseason. He came out and he struggled, but I think a lot of that was due to the play of Tyrod Taylor. Now that Baker Mayfield has taken over, that's going to help. In fact, we saw it in the game. He was having a very quiet game. And the first 2 drives after Baker Mayfield was back, he had 2 big catches. So I think right away he's a guy that you should consider. I think you're going to see a huge increase in his value. David Njoku out there for the Browns. Another one is Will Disley. Now, Will Disley is 48% available, the Seattle tight end. Today, he kind of came back down to earth, and so what's going on? A lot of people thought out of college that he was more of a run blocking or pass blocking tight end, didn't have great hands. Had 2 good weeks there. Now, week 3, what do you think? I think that what we saw in week 1 and week 2 is kind of an exception. I think he's going to come down to earth. I think he'll have an occasional decent game. Tyler Eifert today had a very nice game. He is 50% available. He's always had a nose for the red zone, but the targets are being dispersed between him and 2 other tight ends, so I don't think you can trust him a whole lot. Ben Watson out there is a decent play, 64% available, but he's not a great play. A guy out there that's intriguing is Dallas Goedert, the tight end for the Philadelphia Eagles. Today he has 7 catches, 73 yards, and a TD. Carson Wentz came back, didn't look great. We said he'd probably be a little rusty for totality. Like, if you have to start him, great, you can do it, but it'd be nice to have one game on your belt just to see how he's going to do there. The problem with Dallas is that him and Zach Ertz really kind of hurt each other's value. They're both very good tight ends, and they just bleed production from one another, and they bleed targets. Another guy out there that's not quite ready to be a fantasy starter, but a guy that I think a few weeks from now will be, is Mark Andrews, tight end for the Ravens. He's looked good at times. I think he's going to continue to develop there. Let's look at the defense waiver wire considerations out there. Look at Cleveland versus Oakland. Cleveland has a good defense. Don't underestimate how good they are. So if you're desperate, if you're in a daily fantasy lineup, whatever it might be, Cleveland versus Oakland is a good pickup. Then you got the Chargers versus San Francisco. Now the Chargers have disappointed a lot of people, but one, there's talk that Joey Bosa could be back, but it sounds like he's probably not going to be. But if Jimmy Garoppolo is out, that Chargers defense could rebound versus the 49ers. Arizona and Seattle. I think both of them. You look at Seattle, I look at Russell Wilson, I think going into this week had been sacked more than any other quarterback in the NFL, been pressured more than any quarterback in the NFL going back last couple of years. That offensive line is not that much better, so Arizona could get pressure, and vice versa. I think that Josh Rosen will get the start, and if that's the case, anytime a rookie quarterback gets a start, you're going to love that. So either one of those plays. And the other one out there is Tennessee versus Philadelphia out there. Tennessee is a very underrated defense. I want to talk about some long-term options. Guys that maybe you don't want to pick up now, but you want to look ahead a little bit. We're going to see right now, none of those running backs for Indianapolis Colts have really singled themselves out. None have been great. Robert Turbin was the one running back in that offense that looked best in the preseason. He got suspended for 4 games. He'll be back. You keep your eye on him if you get very desperate. Ronald Jones, running back for the Buccaneers, played terrible, played himself right off of even getting a start there, even playing. He's been inactive. But right now, Peyton Barber hasn't looked really good there, and so we'll see what Peyton Barber does tomorrow night. But if he continues to struggle, I guarantee the Buccaneers will give Jones a second look there, so keep an eye on that. In a couple weeks now, if you're in a dynasty league, let's say, and you start off 1-5 and you think that you're out of it, you could pick up players like a Darius Geis or Jerick McKinnon that you could stash. Another one out there is Dante Foreman, who is recovering from Achilles injury. A couple guys to keep an eye out there too long-term would be Doug Martin. They've increased his carries. He actually looks good again. He looks like he's got nice cuts. He looks sharp. He looks quick, explosive. Right now, it doesn't hold value with Marshawn Lynch. There's someone have to happen, but keep your eye on him. If you're on Yahoo or different leagues like that, you can click the watch button and they kind of put that in a category for you. And then another one out there is Cameron Meredith. They brought him over from Chicago, paid him $5 million a year. A couple years ago, he had some really good numbers there, 880 yards in 14 games. He had 3 games over 100 yards, looked really good. As number 2 guy there, thought he would do great. He was slowly recovering, so it took him a while to come back. He was still recovering the preseason. Well, today he finally had his first active. He started, had a touchdown, 1 catch, 11 yards, and a TD. He's not a guy that I run to now, but he's definitely somebody to watch in a couple weeks. If he gets in shape again, learns that offense, does well, you got to love the fact that he's going to have Drew Brees throwing the ball. So those are some waiver wire considerations. Once again, we appreciate you guys coming out, watching the site, supporting us, whatever you do. We love to hear your input. God bless and take care.